on, Sideline Fans? And we got some visitors. So excited about it. We got Matt and Zach from Do You Know Ball. That is at the at sign on YouTube, at sign DYKB underscore POD. So at DYKB underscore POD. So Zach and Matt, why don't you introduce yourselves and give the fans sort of what you've been up to, what you like, all that kind of good sports stuff.
Yeah, so for starters, I'm Zach. Yeah, like you mentioned. But we just started this podcasting game, so we're really starting to get into it. Really starting to love it. And each podcast, on our channel, we usually just debate back and forth. Usually Mets and Yankees because we're both big baseball fans. But yeah.
All right, Matt.
Yeah, so I'm Matt. Everything Zach said, we're co-hosts for Do You Know Ball. We've been primarily been talking a lot about the MLB because it's been coming up, a lot of news in the off season. We're getting into basketball, football lately. We do have a lot of debates. Me and Zach share a lot of different views, mainly for our sports teams. I like the Yankees. He likes the Mets. I like the Nets. He says he's a Knicks fan. So, we just kind of go back and forth between each other's words. So it's always fun, but we're really happy to be here today.
Awesome. Okay, so let's talk about the Super Bowl and some things that sort of the aftermath of the Super Bowl. And Zach, why don't you start us off today?
Yeah, so the first really pressing topic is obviously Travis Kelce going up to Coach Reed and starting pretty much like a fight and stuff that was caught on camera. Um, Travis Kelce was just really angry with Reed for not putting him in on the play that Pacheco fumbled, but it wasn't just that. It was obviously he really didn't get the football much the whole game. Like he wasn't really a factor until the fourth quarter, and then he started getting the ball and making a difference and everything. And then, as soon as the play happened, Antonio Brown had some choice words to say, and he said, "If that was me, I would have been kicked out of the league." And that's pretty shocking. That's what caught a lot of attention on like social media and everything. And then afterwards, after the game was finished, both Reed and Travis Kelce just played it off and pretended like nothing happened. And like who wouldn't? Did just won a Super Bowl. So
yeah. Well, do you think? I mean, once I saw that when CBS played it, it did get me to think a little bit differently about Travis Kelce. I had someone yesterday morning actually say, they really like the guy, but bumping your boss, bumping your coach. I mean, it was a little bit much. It's one thing to go into their, get into their, their personal space, their grill, whatever you want to call it. But it's another thing because he did that and he bumped the guy. I mean, any thoughts on that? I mean, if it was hockey, sort of what Antonio Brown said, if it was hockey or God forbid you guys talk baseball all the time, if it was baseball, he'd be out of the game if it was a ref. So, are our standards different or something?
Well, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, Travis Kelce, has been an icon put up there on a pedestal. So, I mean, when he did that, obviously all eyes are on him because especially with Taylor Swift and everything, all eyes are gonna be on Travis Kelce no matter what. So the fact that he did that and it was caught on camera, I personally think he was out of line. It doesn't make sense to go up to a coach who you say you have passion for and you love the guy and you wouldn't have it any other way in the Super Bowl. And just start pretty much a little bit of a fight on the sideline, and especially in a crucial game like the Super Bowl, like you're trying to win a championship. So to try to throw off the team pretty much, that doesn't make sense to me. There is probably better ways to go about it.
Matt, any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think Zach kind of said it perfectly where you kind of have Travis Kelce's kind of in like the limelight as of late. Like he's in the spotlight. Everyone's kind of seeing him. I don't want to necessarily call him the golden boy, but a lot of people have kind of been holding him to that standard. And I agree with Antonio Brown. I think if he were a guy that were to do this, I think it would be a totally different situation. I mean, at the end of the day, though, it is the Super Bowl. You do want your best players out on the field. I understand his frustration wanting to be out there, but regardless of who you are, you can't make physical contact with your coach like that. So that's kind of where I stand on it. But
I'm I'm old enough to remember the Latrell Sprewell incident. It wasn't anything like that where he was choking his coach, but bumping the coach, but there's probably different rules for different players, and there's different rules for different teams. When your star player or one of your star players does something like this and you're Andy Reid, maybe you're a little bit more laid back, but I can't imagine something like this happening to Jimmy Johnson, or definitely not on the college level, but in professional football. I mean, there's a lot of coaches back in the day. Tom Landry with the Dallas Cowboys never would have allowed anything like, I mean, they would have been off the team immediately, but I think there is leeway. Now, I do think that there is this charm, if you will, with Travis Kelce, because even at Disneyland, they interviewed Mahomes, and he was talking about how good, or how great sort of the life of Travis Kelce is right now, with the whole Taylor Swift. And, we've seen ad nauseum, and we'll get into that probably a little bit later, but, we've seen the images, the videos of them on the dance floor at the after party and all these other things. So he's probably getting away with a few things that, like Brown says, not too many people would be allowed. And on certain teams, it definitely wouldn't be allowed. There just wouldn't be. I can't imagine someone doing this to Tony Dungy or John Gruden. Like, I think that would be different. Andy Reid's a little bit older. I think he's a little bit more laid back. He's been around a Kelce for well over a decade, whether it was Jason or Travis. So he knows the family and they have good relationships. But I mean, on a personal level, I can't imagine bumping my boss, and getting away with it and just moving on from that. So I know it's football. I know it's different. So,
but also in the press conference afterwards, Travis Kelce was and Coach Reid both had their sides of the story, and Coach Reid literally said that, Travis was just trying to tell me I could score, like, just put me in the game and I'll score for you. And it's just a whole ploy. I think it's just to cover up what actually was said, because we can't tell unless there was a mic that caught the whole scene. So he's definitely getting covered up a lot, and it should be interesting to see how that plays out in the future.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I mean, I think that next year they'll be looking on the sidelines for these kinds of things. If Kansas City makes the playoffs and any games are under duress, people will be looking for these kinds of incidents. I mean, there was that going on as it was. There were, I think Pacheco, after he fumbled initially, was going up and down. They said the benches and stuff and apologizing to people. So there's all kinds of different attitudes and things. So I definitely understand. I'm sure in Travis's own way, he was telling Andy he wanted to be in the game, but he did it in a way that was, you could tell from just even not knowing what they said, not even being able to read lips, that it was a heated discussion and something Travis wasn't comfortable with, and probably did it in an unacceptable way. I'll be kind of interested, because I'm kind of a dork and I watch him and Jason on their podcast and see what he says about that. Is he going to continue to cover it up and kind of play it off and say, like he did after the Super Bowl, or is he going to get a little bit more real and maybe even apologize or say his actions weren't right? Because bumping into it's one thing to raise your voice in the heat of the moment. Star players do that all the time. I want the ball. I want the ball. I want the ball. It's another thing to make contact with someone, and it was forceful. So I do think Andy was really covering for him, though, when he said, "Oh, he caught me off balance," but it's like, come on, Andy. I mean, you're an immovable object, really. I mean, I don't know if you are off balance. You always have 2 feet on the ground. So, anything else on that before we move on to Coach Shanahan?
No, I think we touched on everything.
I just think at the end of the day, it's just, he drafted him, right? So I just think it's all love at the end of the day, right? Even though what Kelce said, that he was just showing how much he loved him, at the end of the day, I'm just sure it's all love between them.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. And there is something to be said about the heat of the battle. When you really want to win and you got players who are all fired up, things are going to happen like this. They just are. I mean, it's happened in every sport. I can name something in every sport where something like this happened. Even with, hockey coaches, things like this happen, where there's yelling and things like that. So, all right, let's go to Coach Kyle Shanahan. Matt, you have a take on this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Kyle Shanahan, what he did in the most recent Super Bowl is something that's almost really familiar with him. And he is known to be a generational choker all over social media. That's what the people are calling him. That's the term that we're coining for Kyle Shanahan. So this is now the third Super Bowl where Coach Shanahan has blown a lead of more than 10. And the first one was when he was the offensive coordinator with the Falcons. He lost after holding a 28-3 lead. And then head coach of the Niners against the Chiefs in 2020, I believe, blew a 20-10 lead. And now in this most recent Super Bowl, again, head coach of the Niners blew 10-0 lead against the Chiefs, who ended up obviously winning the Super Bowl. And it just it's almost just like, why is this happening? There's definitely there's some pattern. The most recent thing with this Super Bowl was they abandoned the run game, right? You have McCaffrey, the offensive player of the season, right? He was dominating the games, doing so good, had such a tremendous postseason for the Niners, and it was working so well in the first half. And then all of a sudden, it just kind of disappeared after halftime. And it really just kind of is like, why? Like, you had almost like an easy path to the Super Bowl. Mahomes didn't have the strongest first half. The Chiefs didn't have the strongest first half. So you found something that was working and just kind of abandoned it. And it's not like this is the first time it's happened. I believe the same thing almost happened 4 years ago where they also abandoned the run game. So I think it's just a thing with Kyle Shanahan as to why is he abandoning the run game, And is this something that we need to have a discussion about with Kyle Shanahan? Because like I said, this is now the third time where he's blown a big lead in the Super Bowl.
Zach, anything?
So basically with Shanahan, I just think this is super unlucky, especially just considering it's his third Super Bowl that he's blown a big lead. And they did come out in the second half and abandon the run game. I do agree with that, Matt. And something that's so strong, like you have one of the best running, if not the best running back in the league, and you abandon your strategy that was working in the first half. The Chiefs looked lost. Patrick Mahomes did not look like himself in the first half, and you abandon your strategy, you abandon what you are used to doing, and it's just it's a bad look. And a game that you could have won. You could have easily won that game if you continue to apply pressure in the second half, continue to rack up points. It could have been an easy Super Bowl victory for the 49ers. And my God, I mean, they had a stacked lineup, from top to bottom, from defense to offense. It's just all around a great team. So for them to end up losing this one it's really disappointing, to say the least.
Well, the one thing I'll say about the Super Bowl this year is, even though I think we all can agree that the 49ers in the first half were dominating on both sides of the ball. They were taking Kansas City's offense off, just off the field, and their offense was moving the ball pretty well. Outside of the early fumble, they were moving the ball really well, and they weren't making a lot of mistakes. Now, it's interesting to me, and I talked about this a little bit yesterday. It's interesting to me that they only were leading 10-3 at half. As much as they dominated on both sides of the ball, as much as McCaffrey was dominating the game from just an offensive standpoint. I mean, when he was running in the first half, it looked like the defenders were all running in mud, and he wasn't. I mean, it's like Pac-Man and the Ghost, are blinking and they're moving slow. I mean, he just moves at a whole different level. And that's why he probably led the league in rushing, I think, this year. But the idea is Kansas City's defense, I know this is going to sound crazy, was just good enough to just allow 10 points. And it's not to take away what you guys are saying. They did abandon the run. They should. And even what was weird is supposedly Shanahan told the announcers of the broadcast that he didn't want to abandon the run. He admitted that. They relayed that message to the audience. You know, if you were at a party, you probably didn't hear it, but I was able to. So I remember that. But he did immediately in the third. And they didn't get a first down, San Francisco, until like 1 minute left in the third quarter. Their offense was 3 and out, or maybe there was a turnover or something in there, but they weren't moving the ball. They weren't doing anything. They couldn't do anything. The reason why I think Kansas City is a dynasty, okay, and I think Patrick Mahomes is the head of this dynasty. Okay. If it was a snake, he would be the head of the snake, but you have to put in there, as much as you want to put Kelsey in there, as much as you want to put Pacheco in there, as much as you want to put those guys in there, you got to start looking at their defense. You got to look at Chris Jones. You got to look at McDuffie. You got to look at Snead. He had that stupid penalty in the first, but once he settled down and he wasn't hitting people in the head and getting 15-yard penalties, they were just good enough to keep the 49ers in check. Remember, the 49ers scored 1 touchdown in the first half, and that was on a special trick play. They didn't do it with a run. They didn't do it with a pass. They did it with a trick play. Otherwise, they only had 3 points on the board. That tells you something about Kansas City's defense. That goes back to the dynasty. Shanahan, to Matt's point, he is this, what's coming to be this, incredible choker. I think it comes down to adjustments. I think Andy Reid, okay, because they played him in 2 Super Bowls now, and that's where he's lost a 10-point lead. Andy Reid makes adjustments. He can make an adjustment at halftime to change the face of the game. And I don't think Kyle Shanahan has that ability right now. I think he goes in with a pregame. I mean, obviously, if you have a 10-game or a 25-point, 25-point lead in a Super Bowl, okay, you're doing something right. You're planning the Super Bowl, the pregame Super Bowl. You're planning the pregame, fantastic. Your offense, fantastic. Everything's moving the way it is. But good teams make adjustments, and he can't keep up with it. It's almost like he needs his dad to help him out or something, or he needs someone in there. I mean, that's just sort of the way I look at it. Let me know your guys' thought on that. But we can't underestimate Kansas City's defense, and Shanahan can't make adjustments apparently. And yes, maybe he's a choker because of that.
Well, it's funny. You also mentioned the Kansas City defense and how good they are. You saw Chris Jones actually take leadership after the touchdown was scored and really just pull everybody aside and like, look, we have to get our together and get everything in order to keep ourselves in this game. Like, we're not losing this game. And so, yeah, a lot of credit does have to go to their defense, but the 49ers, again, like I've been saying, they should have done a lot better job knowing what was working going into the second half.
Well, and I'm going to touch base on something here that we all prep for. I think, Matt, you put this together. I'm not sure if it was you or Zach, but, defensively, the Chiefs kept Kittle in check. I mean, the stats you have here, he was targeted 3 times. He had 2 catches for 4 yards, and he's 0 for 2 in Super Bowls. And everyone's putting him on the same level as Kelsey. He's not. He's not because of that. Because he can go so silent, he's not on that level, And I think by keeping him silent, that was one way the defense of the Chiefs was able to not let the game get out of hand. Because let's be honest, they could have been losing 21-0, at least 17-0 at some point, until they could have had that, a field goal, but they could have been down 3 touchdowns, but they weren't allowing that. They were at least controlling one aspect, and that was the Kittle aspect of the game. I guess they're, sometimes they do this in basketball. Let so-and-so beat us, but we're not going to let Jordan beat us. Let Pippen score his 32 points, but we're not going to let Jordan beat us. I don't know if that's possible, but they obviously said, we're not going to let Kittle beat us, McCaffrey's going to get what he's going to get, but we're going to keep Kittle in check. So I think that was one strong aspect of their play as well. I really think their defense is, it's like Dennis Rodman with the Bulls. I keep thinking of Mahomes as Jordan, and it's like Dennis Rodman with the Bulls. Yeah, he wasn't great to look at. He was a character on and off the court, but when it came time to getting a rebound, he was a scientist. He was a professor. He knew how people shot and how their balls ricocheted off the backboard and all of that. And their defense now is not a liability like it used to be. Like, hey, we have to score 100 points, otherwise we're going to lose, 50 to 45 or something like that. So anyway, any thoughts on that, on Kittle, on the defense, anything like that?
Okay, man.
Well, I mean, just to kind of touch back on everything, you said something that kind of made me look at it in a new light, and it was to not necessarily count out the Chiefs defense, right? I just viewed it as, Chiefs were not great the first half, right? But you made very good points where they did only hold them to 10 points for as many weapons that the 49ers have, for the Chiefs to still only have them put up 10 points is still honestly tremendous. And then Zach talked about the leadership and the whole dynasty aspect. It's not just, we always think of Mahomes as like the head of the snake, as you were saying, but then you go down and you still have the body, you have the tail, you have everything else that still makes up that snake. And the leadership doesn't just stem with Mahomes, it stems from the defense. And even Andy Reid being one of the better head coaches, that we've ever seen. It's all just incredible how it all just kind of gets put together. And with the whole, George Kittle, his stats and everything, he, came into this game with vengeance. I actually think that was his quote that he said 4 years ago, that he said, I'm going to come back here. I don't know exactly word for word, but he's like, I'm going to come back here and I'm not going to lose. I'm going to come back with vengeance. And then, clearly he did not show. It's almost like he wasn't even there.
Yeah.
The Chiefs, whether they just knew how to defend him or in practice, they're used to defending Kelsey, who's just at a much greater magnitude than a much greater magnitude than Kittle. Maybe they just viewed it as, it's not going to be that hard guarding Kittle. So It's just, for Kittle to not really back up his words, but also it's not necessarily on him per se. It's more so just what we're talking about, a testament to how good the Chiefs actually were defensively in that game.
Well, and the one thing I have to say, and if you guys think differently, let me know. But if you're a superstar, if you're really a superstar, like if you're a Mahomes, a tight end Kelsey, if you're even a Purdy, I'll say, he had a great season. He's sort of upper echelon now. You have to give him that. You don't show up at the Super Bowl. You don't show up at the NBA Finals. You don't show up in the NHL and lay a goose egg. I mean, 4 yards on 2 catches, that's a goose egg. And so was he not getting open? Was it the defense? What was he not ready for it? Could he not handle, I've always likened, I always think about the Super Bowl. I don't know, but I always have a feeling there's a little bit more contact as you get closer and closer to the Super Bowl in the playoffs, like with the secondary and the wide receivers and things like that, or in this case, a tight end. So I know that there might be a little bit more pushing and grabbing and all of those kinds of things. Travis Kelce said earlier this year in his podcast that it finally dawned on him why when they play at home, the other team's secondary wears red gloves. It's so that the refs don't see the hold, on their jerseys. And so it's got to be in the Super Bowl where it's twice as bad, But I think what it says is he's been in the situation. Kittle's been in the situation before, and to lay a goose egg like he did, now he could come back. But you guys are baseball fans, and I'm sure you probably remember this. For a long time, or at least a couple years, Kershaw was not the man in the playoffs. He couldn't win the big game. He was not the man. And it wasn't until, they got some other pieces around him that I think he might have settled in, or maybe he got a little bit older and he settled in that way. But there are just some people who can't get to that level. Greg Maddux was a great regular season pitcher, but in the playoffs, he wasn't as good as Smoltz. You know, he just wasn't. So there's just sometimes people who, for a variety of reasons, can't get there. At this point, I'm going to go out on a real big limb here and say George Kittle is not a superstar. He's not. He's a great player. He had a great season. I think he was the number one tight end, but he's not a superstar. He had a good season, but you can't lay a goose egg like this and be a superstar. You just can't. You cannot do. I mean, Jordan played with the flu and scored 30 points. I mean, come on. So, you just can't lay a goose egg. So,
well, he's not comparable to Travis Kelce, like you guys have been saying, but in a way, is it similar maybe to think about it through what Travis Kelce was going through the first three quarters, but in George Kittle's case, the whole game, like, was he just not given the ball and he just didn't speak up about it and actually voice his opinion, like, hey, give me the ball, start looking at me, looking for me on the field so I can make a difference in this game. Maybe something like that,
yeah, it could be. I agree with that completely. And then it goes to, should he have pulled a Kelce and gone to his coach and said, give me the ball? Or you got to figure, when it was 4th and 1 in overtime, they were giving the ball to Mahomes. I mean, I said, I was watching the game with my son and I said, there's this ball's going to be in the hands of one person, Mahomes, and he's either going to they're going to live and die with Mahomes. Like, he's going to take the last shot, however you want to phrase it. And when in the big games, you go to the big people. Now, every once in a while, a Hardman catches something or some obscure player catches his first touchdown because it's a trick play or no one's expecting it. And those things happen. But for the most part, Kelce did come up big. Now, he didn't score a touchdown, but he had some big catches, I think, in the overtime, right? Or in one of their runs, possessions towards the end of the game, he came up with a 20-yard, and he barreled into the guy at the end. I mean, it was huge. He came up, he made a statement. And now, did Kittle not raise his voice like Kelce did? Or did Shanahan and the 49ers not go to him? And why didn't they go to him? Did they not go to him because he's not a superstar? I mean, to have a playbook and not use your most talented people, you have to question that. They were going to McCaffrey until they didn't. Maybe it's an adjustment here or there. Maybe if Shanahan was on with us, he'd be telling us, they made an adjustment. We couldn't get the ball to Kittle. Fine. But you got to get your best hands open in the Super Bowl. You have to get your best players the ball, because what's the point of having the best in the league? I think it comes down to Kansas City's defense was good enough to take him out of the game for the most part. And the 49ers, he didn't come up. He didn't fight for the ball. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't make a statement to say, hey, give me the ball. He just fell away. He was an afterthought. It was, almost like anybody else was playing tight end, not someone who was the number one tight end for the season or something. So
Yeah,
anyway.
and also with you got to beg the question, right? Maybe I'm interested in finding the stats on how many catches did Brandon Ayuk make? How many times did they target him? Because he was definitely a weapon for them all season.
Yeah,
and I watched the whole game. I can't remember them targeting him too much. And it's Matt, I hear you looking it up.
I'm finding it for you.
I remember one time, and I can't remember if he caught it or not, but I remember just once they said his name, I think, that I remember.
Situation.
He had three. Sorry, Zach. He had 3 catches for 49 yards.
Exactly. So that's another thing. You don't target Kittle. You don't target Ayuk. They, two of your greatest weapons, pretty much outside of CMC, and you're not targeting them. So maybe that's also another reason why they lost the game, why they choked away the game.
Yeah, and I will say, Kansas City played well. I believe that they won the game, but the 49ers gave them some of this game. I'm not going to say that the 49ers gave the game to them, because Kansas City had to come back. They were down. They had to come back. They had to go into overtime and win that game. However, the 49ers offense, as you both have definitely said, just dropped off. I mean, how many times did you hear McCaffrey in the second half? Not very much. There wasn't, and there was adjustments because Kansas City wasn't allowing that 7 to 8 yard, 10-yard run by him anymore in the second half. So he was getting 2 to 3 to 4 yards. So they did something, and Shanahan it just went through his hands like sand. I mean, he had it, and he can't keep up with the adjustments that the other team makes. That's the way I look at it. I could be way off on this, but and then he adjusts himself. That doesn't make any sense. Why do you abandon the run when you say you need the run? It's just bad. It was bad play calling in the second half by the Niners. So Matt, why don't you tell us about this Cousins curse that you heard about?
Yeah, so there's this thing going around, this little phenomenon for ever since Kirk Cousins has entered the league. Any team that has lost to Kirk Cousins has not gone on to win the Super Bowl that same year. So one of the primary things this year, everyone viewed the Niners as kind of favorites, possibly, if you viewed them over the Chiefs. But one odd thing was they actually ended up losing to Kirk Cousins this year. So there were a lot of fans still holding out hope for the curse. And, the curse strikes again. The Niners lost to Kirk Cousins, and they don't go on to win the Super Bowl. Another example, I believe the Packers also lost to Kirk Cousins this season. There you go, didn't win the Super Bowl. And it's just like this. It's just, I don't know how people find this out, first off. It's just really, really bizarre that this curse is still like a thing. Will it ever be broken? I don't know. I truthfully don't know. I'm sure some fans are hoping for Kirk Cousins to beat Mahomes in the near future. I'm sure some people are going to want a different outcome. But it's so weird. And I've kind of been trying to look for any more outstanding examples, anything. Unfortunately, it's more of a Twitter thing. I can't really find too much information about it online, but it's just it's a fun thing to talk about. And does Kirk kind of have the ice in his veins? You know what I mean? To kind of knock out these more top tier teams? Who knows? But it's just kind of something fun to think about.
Well, I think Minnesota is one of those teams. I mean, earlier on, by the mid 80s, I guess just the 70s, they had lost a lot of Super Bowls, 2 to 3 Super Bowls or something like that in the 70s. Fran Tarkenton, well-known Hall of Fame quarterback, but could never win the big game. And I'm not saying it's necessarily his fault, but he was known as that. He couldn't win the big game. And I think they're sort of one of those tortured franchises, the way a different kind of torture maybe, but like the Bengals and the Browns and things like that they, the Browns don't even make the Super Bowl. The Bengals at least make it, but they lose. The Vikings have lost, but they can't even necessarily make it to the NFC Championship game anymore. So I think I think just in generally speaking, that there's a curse for the Vikings, that they just can't get to that next level. They just can't, elevate themselves, because you got to think, I mean, I don't know, 10 years ago, San Francisco was a bottom feeder, and here they are in Super Bowl, 2 Super Bowls in 4 years, or was there another one they lost to? No, it was just 2. And the Vikings can't even make it to the Super Bowl. So there is some sort of curse there, whether it's Cousins directly or it's something to do with the Vikings. I do think there's a curse there. So.
Yeah. I just think they don't have enough star power, pretty much. So, I mean, they have Justin Jefferson. Not many other names really come to my mind, especially. I don't know if I'm pretty sure Cousins is not a part of the team anymore, right? Is he still part of the Vikings?
Agent, right?
Free agents? Yeah. So So now they're looking. They got Dobbs. I'm pretty sure, right? Anybody fact check that? Dobbs is the quarterback for the.
Man, I'm gonna let you look that up.
Josh Dobbs. They did trade for him at the deadline, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe he was benched a couple games into this, not too quickly, but he did eventually get benched.
Yeah, so exactly my point. I mean, they just don't have enough star power to get over the hump. They have a lot of areas to focus on, whether it be in defense or offense. They just got to improve in a lot of aspects if they want to get to the top, and that's just how it's going to be. And for the time being, the Vikings are just going to continue with being in mediocrity. Like they're just going to fizzle out pretty much every year until they make the necessary moves and adjustments they need for their roster.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I guess some of the big news was the fact that the Super Bowl was the most watched telecast in history. And I actually saw something today that said something along the lines of at some point 202 million. There was the people who watch they put this number there, 123.4 million people. But they said at pieces of the game, there were 202 million people watched parts of the game. Okay, I don't know how they figure all this out, especially with streaming and all these other things, but that's what they estimated. And they said that last year's Super Bowl, the Philadelphia versus Kansas City was at that same number was at like 183. And just as a comparison, that number last year, I think, and maybe you guys know, was 115 million, and it was the most watched telecast. And this one beat it by 7%, which is just tremendous. I mean, it's crazy. And I figured that the game would have a high number because it went to overtime. Sometimes what happens, and you guys probably know this, people don't watch the first half, and then all of a sudden they see, oh, it's 10-3, the Chiefs are losing. Now, as we know, there's a lot of Americans out there now who hate the Chiefs because they see them as always winning. That's what happens when you're a dynasty. You know, ask the Atlanta Braves, ask the New York Yankees, you know, ask any of these kinds, even the Cardinals for a period of time when they still have Albert Pujols, you know, they were seen as like a dynasty and people hated them. You know, so they were down 10-3, and then the game got close. Then it went to overtime. People are online. They're looking at the scores. They're saying, oh man, I better turn on the TV and see where this game is, because it's going to be one to remember. And I think that's how you get such big numbers, because let's face it. I mean, Kansas City is not New York, LA, or Chicago when it comes to media and fan bases, you know. So you don't have it there. San Francisco, a much bigger city, but LA has their own teams. They can't claim. I mean, Oakland, or the Raiders rather, they have Oakland, they have LA, they have Las Vegas, they have fans from all over. But you know, these are relatively. San Francisco is not really a small market in my estimation, but a small market team. The other thing about it that I think really helped, and I don't have the numbers here, maybe you guys do, is this was the most betting. I saw something $300 million was bet on the Super Bowl, like through casinos, or I think it was $200 or $300 million. It just, and let's face it, I'm just continuing to talk. I didn't have time to pull up, but we've already looked at the videos where the people are smashing the TVs. I've seen multiple ones of those now, which are kind of funny. So there was a lot of gambling on this game. And once you start with the gambling, you're going to increase your viewership from that alone.
Yeah, there was a lot of commercials for that too, like throughout the entire Super Bowl and beforehand too. One thing that stuck out to me was there was a progressive commercial. And it wasn't even, the Super Bowl didn't even start. There was like hours till the Super Bowl was gonna begin, and it's just a ad that takes you through the casino, and there's like a chip next to the Progressive logo and stuff like that. So, and a lot of FanDuel ads, especially kids like our age, like they're going to put bets on the Super Bowl. It's one of the most common things. But I also want to touch on the fact that you mentioned like dynasties and stuff like that. So I compare, because I watch a lot more NBA and MLB and stuff like that, but mainly towards the NBA. I watch more. The dynasty factor mainly compares to the Warriors for me, and how they were, and how every year they won a title. They won and they got Durant, and they won 2 rings with Durant, and then you get all the way up into the 2018 one, and you know, everybody was rooting against the Warriors, and you know, it's unlucky for, you know, the 49ers to not win this, but everybody was rooting for the Warriors in 2018 for the for the Raptors in 2018, and they won. And even on the injuries, they were rooting against the Warriors. When Klay Thompson went down, they were cheering. Kevin Durant went down, they were cheering, and it was a bad look. So I think that especially now going forward, every time when the Kansas City Chiefs make a deep run into the postseason, or even if they make the postseason, a lot of people are going to have hate and a lot of people are going to be against the team.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think what happens too is when a team just starts winning in general on a regular basis, season in and season out, people just hate them just because the answer I always hear is, I want to see somebody new. I want to see a new team. I'm tired of Patrick Mahomes. And if God forbid, if Kelsey continues to date Taylor Swift, people are already telling me how much they're sick of seeing her on the screen, which, okay, I get it. I understand. I'm not saying I love it or hate it or whatever it is. What I'm saying is, if he marries her or they continue to date, she's going to be shown all the time again. I mean, it's just, people are going to get sick of that. They're sick of that. They're sick of the Taylor Swift angle with Kelsey, and they're sick of the Chiefs, and it's just going to continue to grow. They're going to want to look at different teams. And I think, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So some of it was just, I felt was unnecessary. I mean, I know obviously with the Super Bowl gone, the NFL and Roger Goodell is going to pan to Taylor Swift and at any moment of the game, but through crucial moments of the game, I don't feel like it's necessary to see, oh, hey, what's Taylor doing up in the skybox? What is she doing with Ice Spice and Blake Lively and all them? What is she doing? Oh, she's chugging a beer. Oh, there's a crucial play going on down on the field. Like, why are we not focused on that? So some of it I feel like is unnecessary. I know that the NFL and Roger Goodell are going to do that at times because they're going to want publicity, and she brings a lot of audience to the NFL, which is good. And she's probably made Roger Goodell a lot of money this year on top of what they already normally make with the Super Bowl. But just a lot of it is just unnecessary. Like, I don't think we need to be worried about what Taylor Swift is doing rather than worry about what's on the field in the biggest game of the year. That's just my opinion on that.
Yeah, I just want to jump in real quick before I forget, and I have a habit of doing that, is the higher viewership could also possibly be part of the Taylor Swift, the Swifties. I mean, it could be so. They tuned in because I've seen videos too where it just so happens that it's like a young girl and she knows football now, and the dad's all proud. Like, these videos are coming out like she never liked football until this year because she's a Taylor Swift fan, and she knows that Taylor's on the TV for these games. So that could be another reason. The gambling, what did I say? The gambling and Taylor Swift, that could be a reason that, the viewership's up. So, man, I didn't want to interrupt in case you were saying something. I apologize.
No. In regards to Taylor Swift, I saw a stat. She was only on our screens for a total of 54 seconds, which is, the question is, how many times, though, did they actually pan to her? I don't know how many times they panned, but if you put it all together, it was 54 seconds. And I totally agree that I do think a large increase in terms of viewership was 100% because of Taylor Swift. A lot of the Swifties are just cheering for Taylor's boyfriend. That's what they know him as. They don't know him as Travis Kelce, just Taylor's boyfriend. The amount of people that I have like on my Instagram that I follow, the amount of people that I've seen cheering for the Chiefs now has just gone up so much simply just because of Taylor Swift. Like, people I know from school, back home, everywhere. And in terms of the betting and everything, this Super Bowl, according to just a quick little research that I've done, $23.1 billion was bet on this Super Bowl. And that is a 35.
Say that number again.
23.1 billion.
Oh, I read that. $23 billion was bet.
That's 35% increase from last year's Super Bowl.
Holy. Do you think that's FanDuel and DraftKings, or is there something, or is it like the states now allow the gambling, or what is that?
I don't know. This is just according to the American Gaming Association that the U.S. adults bet a total of $23.1 billion. And
Wow.
speaking of FanDuel too, they also had the kick of destiny with Gronk that people were betting on too. So it's just more things, and obviously he missed. So it's just maybe they'll do it again next year just to get people to bet more. So they'll always find a way to have people bet and make these large sums of these gambling addictions, basically.
It's an insane number.
I know. I
number.
Didn't believe it when I read it, but this is crazy.
That numbers, I mean, that's just. I know that. I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts? In the first half, I don't think they showed Taylor, but like 2 or maybe 3 times. They didn't show her a lot, I thought, in the first half. In the second half, as Kansas City scored and they were doing more, positive kind of offense, they showed her a heck of a lot more. That's sort of the way I saw it. Like, I thought in the first half, I was kind of satisfied because I didn't see her a lot, but it sort of went up and up as the game went on. And you guys have thoughts on that? Or in the first half, am I going crazy, or did it seem like it was the same or less or more, or what do you think? Am I going crazy, or?
Well, I think it was neutralized because the Chiefs were losing. So if the Chiefs were winning, maybe they would have panned to her more in the first half. But then in the second half, as the game got closer and closer, they panned up to Taylor Swift biting her nails in the skybox, and that's exactly what happened. As soon as the game got closer, as soon as the Chiefs were in reach of the championship, they started panning to Taylor Swift to see what she was doing.
Yeah, I kind of think they're trying to condition people when Travis Kelce does something or the Chiefs, they show Taylor Swift just so like they know that, like, especially for the newer viewers, like the people that have never watched the Super Bowl before and they're only watching for that purpose. So that way they can get their moment of like, yes, like this is why I'm watching, and to get more viewers, to tune in. And I agree with Zach. I think because the Chiefs weren't necessarily doing or having too much like scoring success in the first half, there wasn't maybe much of Taylor, but then obviously the second half came and we saw more of her, and the Chiefs were obviously doing better and they went on to win it. And then you see Taylor at the end of the game, she came on, she kissed Kelce on the field, all the things on social media like that. Everyone went crazy for that. All the Swifties, that was their favorite moment of the game.
Yeah, and they were playing her song at the after party, and they were singing together. Yeah, it goes on and on and on, and I'm sure what's going to happen if they're still dating next year, it's going to be just even bigger. It's going to be, I think what you might see is, and maybe, I don't live in Kansas City, but you'll see more Swifties going to games in case they see her. It'll be, the ticket prices will go up because of that, because 20% of the stadium is there just to maybe get a glimpse at Taylor. It's going to change a little bit of all that. And then you're going to find the people who hate the Kansas City Chiefs, not so much because they win all the time, but they hate Taylor Swift. And it's going to be a whole different reason to hate the Chiefs than it normally would, so that's just sort of the way I see it. But anything else about the Super Bowl that we haven't discussed? I know that I sort of have a hard stop and I hate to throw that at you guys, but anything else that we didn't miss or we didn't talk about?
Nothing really comes to mind right now, but I think we talked about pretty much everything that has to do with the Super Bowl, and I think we covered pretty much everything.
Hey guys, it's been a blast. We got to do more of this, okay? I love
100%, 100%.
This is great. Again, these are the two guys, Matt and Zach from Do You Know Ball. Their YouTube channel is at DYKB_pod, POD, DYKB_pod. Check them out. Give them a sub. Let's do it. Let's get them going. Hopefully they'll invite me on a couple of their shows, and I'll invite them back, and we can talk about this on a regular basis, because this has been a lot of fun. Hope you guys had as much fun watching this as we did putting it all together. So thank you.
Yep.
Matt, Zach, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Thanks.